All right, so we have a new candidate who is officially throwing his hat in the ring for the 2024 GOP showdown, and his name is Vivek Ramaswamy. Okay, so he's put out a couple of different advertisements recently. I'm going to show you a little bit of this one, which was basically his launch off point. Then I'm going to show you a little bit of this interview with Sean Hannity, where he's basically doing what he's been doing to a couple other potential GOP rivals to Donald Trump and just asking them basically, what do you actually disagree with Donald Trump on in terms of policies? And they just completely give non-answers every single time. So we're going to watch that. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this guy's history that might give us some insight in terms of why he is actually running on what he's running on. So without further ado, let's just jump into this absolutely painful advertisement that he recently dropped. I'm going to have to pause this a billion times because there's a lot of stuff that we need to address in this.
We're in the middle of a national identity crisis. Faith, patriotism, and hard work have disappeared, only to be replaced by new secular religions like COVIDism, climatism, and gender ideology.
Okay, so, I mean, a couple of different things. First of all, like, faith is gone. It's disappeared from the country. I mean, I think we're still solidly at a majority of the American people that are, in fact, religious. I happen to be an atheist, but even if faith is going out the door, who gives a fuck? Why is that necessarily inherently a bad thing? I mean, you could make some stretch of an argument that, like, okay, well, some people use this as a, community building aspect or whatever the hell, but, I mean, at the end of the day, whether or not somebody is religious has absolutely no bearing on what kinds of, like, actual policies we should be deploying in the country to materially improve the lives of average working class people. It just seems completely irrelevant. But then, of course, he makes the pivot there after also saying that apparently, the American working class are lazy pieces of shit, I guess, was the implication, with hard work being, evaporated from the United States as well. I mean, that in and of itself would warrant, an entire conversation surrounding just that claim. We're not hard workers anymore in the United States. I mean, probably one of the most overworked societies in the entire world. I mean, we have people who are working multiple jobs and still barely scraping by. People who are working full-time jobs can barely afford to keep a roof over their head, food on the table for themselves and their family. I mean, people are overworking themselves damn near to the brink of death in this country and not being rewarded for the value of their labor. And he turns around and he thinks, no, the problem is actually that, I guess that people are too lazy, kicking their feet up, getting their welfare checks or something like that, I guess was his point. But then again, of course, he pivots to going after, I guess, what he calls the new religions, which would be like COVIDism and, gender ideology and climate religion, which, first of all, like, none of those are religions or faiths. I mean, listen, there's many critiques that I would have of big pharma and especially a lot of the corporations that develop the vaccines. Perfectly fine to criticize the industry. I do it all the time on this channel, but what is your actual critique there? That it's a religion? I mean, do you have any policy priorities where you're meaningfully going to be tackling the corrupting influence of big pharmaceutical companies on our political system? I mean, I'm in favor of fully nationalizing the industry. Are you in favor of that? No, he doesn't go into any specifics on that. Same with climate change. It's like, this is not a religion. This is listening to the scientists, looking at the actual data, and then coming to the conclusion that we need to shift away from fossil fuels as quickly and efficiently and aggressively as possible in order to stave off potential future disaster. Okay, that's climate change. It's not a religion. It's not a cult. It's just following the science. And then same with the, gender ideology attacks, which is a phrase that I hear conservatives use all the fucking time now. I still have not been able to get like a clear definition on what exactly they mean by gender ideology. I mean, it could range from everything to being like hyper specifically focused on like trans care for, youth in this country, or it could be something as broad as just like LGBTQ people existing. So not exactly sure what he means by that, but again, we're just getting started here. So he continues.
We hunger to be part of something bigger than ourselves, yet we cannot even answer the question of what it means to be an American. Today, the woke left preys on that vacuum. They tell you that your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation govern who you are, what you can achieve, and what you're allowed to think.
Okay, I mean, pause there just for a second, man. I mean, listen, as a, the top representative for the so-called woke left, I'd have to give an interjection here because we're basically arguing for the exact opposite of what he just laid out there, right? There's this weird bent where conservatives seem to think that the left wants to just like box people into different categories based on their race, their ethnicity, their gender orientation, their sexual orientation, things like that, right? And just box people off and then like, I guess, come up with some standards to be like, oh, you are, the most oppressed person. You should be given $1 billion a year or something, and that like that's how we want to structure society or something. Like, no, that's not what we're saying. We're pointing out to the reality that historically and in contemporary society in the United States, a lot of different marginalized groups within this country have been set behind or set back intentionally by our systems, our institutions, our policies, the legal framework of this country, the history of chattel slavery and Jim Crow and all of these things, right? That's what we're talking about. We're pointing out the fact that these have, lingering effects on our modern society and the way that we have structured these things. We want to dismantle those structures to actually create a level playing field. But they look at that as in like they want to, I guess, keep everybody focused on like race and gender, and they would, I guess, as an alternative, just sort of like want to gloss over all of those systemic structural issues that we still have in this country and pretend as if everything is perfectly fine now, I guess is the point that he's trying to make there.
This is psychological slavery, and that has created a new culture of fear in our country that has completely replaced our culture of free speech in America. And that is why today I am announcing my run for President of the United States. This isn't just a political campaign. This is a cultural movement to create a new American dream for the next generation. To me, the American dream...
I just want to say, notice how he pointed out that this is a cultural movement. Okay, not a movement like Bernie Sanders was running on like specific economic goals for the American people or for the working class, right? No, it's a cultural movement. And also, I mean, dude, you just jumped in the race. Like, you have literally, as far as we know right now, zero support within the GOP for this, candidacy that you're launching off right now. And you're talking about this as if like you're some sort of like the vanguard leader for the right or something. I mean, it's just kind of bizarre to frame it like that this early on. But I mean, go for it, man. I guess he's gonna talk about meritocracy here in a minute, which is absolutely amazing.
To me, the American dream means you believe in merit, that you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions.
Okay, again, you gotta pause on that, because his implication there when he says like, you get ahead by the content of your character or your work ethic instead of by the color of your skin, the implication there is not, some sort of a leftist critique about how, white people have been structurally advantaged throughout the history of this country, which is true. He's making the opposite point there. He's trying to say that, like, I guess like black people, queer people, whatever you want to, some semblance of minorities within this country, that they are getting advanced because of their race or their ethnicity or their sexual orientation, that like, oh, they've had it too good in this country and white people are the ones who are being oppressed in this kind of a scenario that he's laying out there. And then also, I mean, come on, man, you're gonna talk about merit-based systems? How in the fuck could you make an argument that capitalism is based on some sort of a meritocratic framework? It is an anti-meritocracy. The way that you rise to the top under capitalism, especially under the form of capitalism which that he's arguing for, which would just be completely deregulated, gutting all of these government institutions and any checks on capitalist authoritarian power in this country. But that is an anti-meritocracy. Why? Because you rise to the top of the system by the mass exploitation of other people's labor. You quite literally do not become a billionaire in this country via your own labor value. You do it through the collection of thousands or millions of other people's labor value inputs into the system that you are personally profiting off of. That is the opposite of what a meritocratic system would actually look like. Socialism, on the other hand, would actually be so much closer to the true definition of what a meritocratic economic framework would look like, because you would have workers who are collectively engaging in, democracy within the workplace in order to have more of a control over their workplace. And then on top of that, you would be more fully rewarded for the value of your labor that you are inputting into this system. Okay, right now that profit is being extracted off of the backs of the working class in the form of surplus labor, or as we call it under capitalism, profits, and being shipped off to Wall Street ghouls who do fucking nothing but sit on their ass all day and complain about how, working class people are too lazy or they got too many government checks and nobody wants to work anymore. So again, the idea that capitalism is synonymous with meritocracy is beyond delusional. Okay, it is absolutely completely ridiculous, but that's the implication he's trying to make here.
It means you believe the people who we elect to run the government are the ones who actually run the government, not a federal bureaucracy that grows like a national cancer that is now metastasizing to the private sector. It means that the best ideas win instead of getting censored.
Okay, I'm sorry that I'm pausing this video so many times, but I just want to go back to what he was saying here before the free speech thing, right? What he's talking about here when he's referencing, we believe in accountability, okay, and he references these government institutions. At first, you almost think like, oh, maybe he's about to make a good point here about how, corporate America has infiltrated their way into controlling basically the entirety of the American political system. But no, his point is, again, the opposite of that. He's saying that the problem with a lack of government accountability or a lack of our politically or our elected representatives actually politically representing their own constituents, he's saying the problem isn't like capitalists or corporate America or the billionaire class bribing those officials and then them serving the interests of corporate America and the billionaire class. No, the problem is actually just the government bureaucrats getting too bloated and pushing back against the private sector. I mean, that's the argument he's making here. We live in a country where, again, our entire political system, top to bottom, is basically completely under the control of corporate America, under the control of capitalists. And his analysis of that situation is, oh, we have too much government pushback or government regulations or checks on the capitalist class. Okay, completely insane take there. Now he goes on to talk about free speech, which, whatever, that's fine, man. Do what you want to do. I think that, I talked about the Twitter files on this channel a couple of different times, and it seems to be a bipartisan thing among the elites that they do want to censor free speech. So it's not something that I would go with a, typical partisan lens with. But anyways, we're going to move on here to the Fox News interview where he's basically asked to distinguish himself from Donald Trump. So let's just go ahead and see if he's able to pull this off. Again, not something that I've seen a single, GOP potential 2024 candidate be able to say even a single thing that they have a disagreement with or have a disagreement with Donald Trump on. But let's see if he can show us something different here.
So I'm aware of you. You've been, I believe, on my radio show a number of times, right?
Yes.
But you're not well known to the American people. So you're going up against, eventually I think you'll be going up against some of the biggest names in the Republican Party. Are you running for name recognition, or are you really in this because you want to win and you think you have a better vision than the people that are in the race now?
Sean, I'm in this to be the next president of the United States, and I am running on a vision for our country that I have developed over the last 3 years. This is not somebody else's vision. This is my vision. I believe we're in the middle of a national identity crisis where most Americans can't even answer the question of what it means to be an American today. And I am running for president to revive the ideals that set this nation into motion 250 years ago. Basic ideas like merit, getting ahead based on hard work and your commitment and your dedication rather than your skin color.
I mean, again, he's trying to imply that people who are non-white in this country are being given a dramatic leg up right now within our economy, within our political system. I mean, that part in and of itself is just absolutely hilarious given the historical track record of the United States and our treatment of minorities in this country. But again, he hits home on this idea of like meritocracy, which again, I'm just going to say this one more time. For you to actually genuinely believe that meritocracy is even possible under a capitalist system, I mean, look at the system we have right now. You would have to believe that somebody like Jeff Bezos is working millions and millions of times harder than the average Amazon worker on a daily basis who's stocking the shelves in the warehouses or going around and making so many deliveries every day that they have to piss in a bottle and shit in a bag on the job. I mean, you would have to genuinely believe that he's working harder than thousands and thousands and thousands of the workers who are actually working under him to produce the value that makes him so filthy rich. I mean, it's just completely delusional. But again, unable to point out any distinction between him and Donald Trump.
Ideas like free speech and open debate for settling political differences. The basic idea, the most fundamental idea, that the people who we elect to run the government are the ones who actually run the government rather than a managerial aristocracy that actually runs the show today. And I believe that as president of the United States, I can deliver on that.
Okay, so you're looking for the Republican nomination. Probably the leader right now would be Donald Trump if you look at the polls. What are the policy differences you have between yourself and Donald Trump?
So first of all, Donald Trump's a friend. I'm not running against him. I am running on a vision for our nation.
Wait, but you're not running for him. You're running against him. Let's be honest.
Okay, well, here's what I'm running for our country. But let's talk about differences, because I'm with you, Sean. He was the OG of America First. I'm taking that to the next level with America First 2.0. Okay, let's actually get the job done, which means dismantling federal bureaucracy. Instead of actually these managerial protections and civil service protections, I'm proposing 8-year sunset clauses for anybody in the federal bureaucracy. If I can't derive a paycheck from the federal government as the next U.S. president for more than 8 years, I don't think other federal bureaucrats should either. I'm going to shut down federal agencies. Earlier today, I put out my proposal to actually shut down the Department of Education, which should not exist. That's just the first of many government agencies that I am pledging to shut down as the next president. I am dismantling this climate religion. We have been addicted to a climate religion.
Okay, and then they play the music behind him, kind of usher him off stage like they do at the Oscars, I guess. Okay, so there's his take. First of all, I guess you pointed out a couple of different things that would maybe distinguish you from Donald Trump specifically on policy. They're all garbage distinctions. Somehow you've managed to be even worse than Donald Trump on the differences that you did manage to lay out there. But at the beginning, again, what the hell is with all of these candidates who are just unable to even say, I'm running against Donald Trump? Like, that is literally who you're running against. I saw this with Nikki Haley as well, that we were talking about on this channel and reacting to her appearances, and she was directly asked, like, well, okay, what are you really running against Donald Trump on? And her answer was basically, I'm kicking forward and sideways and kicking all around in a million directions. I'm not going to be kicking against Donald Trump or something like that. And it's like, it's just kind of pathetic. Like, if you actually believe you have a shot at winning this primary, you are going to have to take down Donald Trump. Nobody's going to vote for you because you're saying, oh, Donald Trump did Make America Great Again, I'm doing Make America Great Again 2.0. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? You also have literally, as you said, the OG of the MAGA movement, and he's running again. So you're not running against like Ron DeSantis or some other random person as trying to be the successor to Trump. You have to take down that top dog. And again, they're just completely, refusing to actually confront that reality that you are going to have to go to a war with him eventually if you actually want to win. Now, does this guy actually care about winning? I don't know. I have my doubts. I don't think that he has any even remote legitimate shot at actually winning this, and you're going to see why here in a second when I show you some of his background especially. But again, maybe this is just a clout maneuver from him, maybe this is something else, but we also had a Trump response here, I think maybe to some of the things that he was proposing in this, because it looks like he's also moving to be much more hawkish on China, which is something that Vivek has been proposing here. He wants to completely disconnect us basically economically from China, which there's a lot to say about that, but I'll leave that for a different video. But Trump also put out a response where he's talking about protectionist policies and all of that, total independence from China. So maybe that was in response to it. Maybe Donald Trump is, I guess, feeling the heat from Vivek over here. But listen, if you want to look at the polling data, I haven't seen any that actually include him, so not entirely clear exactly how much he's actually going to be able to get off the bat. Maybe as it develops, he gets a little bit more. But he's definitely got a bold personality. He's more at least entertaining and better in front of a camera than somebody like Mike Pence or like Greg Abbott or Liz Cheney or something like that. But we'll see how this plays out. This is where the current polling data does stand as far as these candidates who are roughly expected to maybe have some involvement in the primary. You got Donald Trump, solid lead here against Meatball Ron. So it seems like he's kind of clobbering him over the head over the last couple of weeks, taking a dramatically larger lead. But again, I'm just going to finish off here just by showing you a little bit of this guy's business background and why this is, number one, pretty revealing in terms of his opinions on our economy and capitalism in general and trying to push back against the radical woke left or whatever. Pretty, revealing when you get a lot of this. But also, I think that this, again, could pose some challenges for him given the current state of the climate in the Republican Party. So they point out here his business career, just straight from the Wikipedia. In 2014, Ramaswamy founded the pharmaceutical company Roivant Sciences, which focuses on applying technology to drug development, serving as the CEO until 2021. He appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine in 2015 for his work on the drug development. Apparently, he's made raised $360 million for this subsidiary, and just made a ton of money off of Big Pharma, which again is something that obviously the establishment elected Republicans don't give a shit about actually challenging the power of the big pharmaceutical industry in this country. But that might play, at least in terms of the narrative, that might not play well with the GOP crowd that you are literally a former CEO of some pharmaceutical company. But we also have this one, and this is where it gets even worse. Ramaswamy is the co-founder and executive chairman of Strive Asset Management, an Ohio-based asset management firm that was backed financially by Peter Thiel, who is like a literal demon. He is the embodiment of the worst aspects of so-called free market, or even taking it a step further to full-blown zero regulations and zero checks on the capitalist system, like a total anarcho-capitalist almost with Peter Thiel. So he's a real demon, and apparently he was financially backing this corporation that Ramaswamy Ramaswamy was setting up. It was also backed by, of course, J.D. Vance, who's besties with Peter Thiel. He says, or they say, Strive was established to offer an alternative to larger asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, which Ramaswamy has criticized for engaging in environmental, social, and governance activities, which are also known as ESG, and mixing business with politics to the alleged detriment of shareholders. Okay. So his critique, let's get it very clear here. His critique of these gigantic Wall Street asset management firms, which are, again, if you want to villainize some corporations around the world, like these are the worst of the worst when it comes to being detrimental to average working class lives, okay? But his critique of these corporations like BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard is that they're too woke. Okay, not that they have too much monopolistic power over different sectors of our economy with housing and healthcare and all of these other different sectors that they have massive financial stakes in. Okay, not the monopolization that these corporations represent or the damage that they do in terms of also things like lobbying on our political system and corrupting influences on our politicians and pushing back against any measures to actually materially improve the lives of average working class people. None of that. That's not the problem with BlackRock and Vanguard. The actual problem is that they're too woke. I mean, again, how does anybody take this guy seriously? Now, my critique, and I would have a critique of ESG, again, this environmental, social, and governance sort of like score that some corporations are able to get. It's basically supposed to be them virtue signaling and trying to be like, okay, listen, we actually care about the environment. We care about, the social effects of capitalism, and we want to be more involved in your community and all of these different things, right? It's a way for them to basically, at the end of the day, just posture and try to virtue signal to the American public to try to overlook some of their more villainous activities that they actually get into on a regular basis. So it's complete nonsense. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's not a representative or a representation of what the left wants in response to tackling, these massive corporations and the monopolization of different industries, right? I mean, it's just basically virtue signaling at the end of the day. But again, his problem is that they're even doing that virtue signaling, right? Okay, his problem is not with any of the structural issues or critiques that you could give of Wall Street or corporate America. It's just basically we should drop the pretense of pretending to give a shit about the world or humanity in general and just be full-blown evil capitalists to the maximum extent possible. Okay, so listen, I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more from this guy. Honestly, I think he is probably the worst of the worst in terms of political candidates that I've pretty much seen in my entire life. I mean, at least in terms of just his economic ideas and what he wants to do to the federal government, which, don't get me wrong, has lots and lots of problems. But the answer to that is not to straight up abolish the entire Department of Education on day one, which is something he has literally said that he wants to do. So I mean, this guy seems to be, pretty full of himself, pretty narcissistic, and he also seems to have some absolutely demented views when it comes to the types of policies that he's running on. So hopefully he doesn't do that well. Again, not like we have many other better candidates per se in the Republican field right now, but I will keep you guys updated because this GOP showdown for 2024 is getting a little bit interesting, let's say.
Everyone is saying good Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying